guys, welcome back. In the previous episode, I actually introduced a bit about planetary strength, and because it is too much to be in one episode, so I have split it up into second episode, just focusing on planetary strengths. So as we know it, the 9 planets in the chart, like for example this chart here, we they do not always influence us human affairs with equal force. It is actually based on their position in the sky that actually affects the strength of the influence and the impact it has on our lives, or rather in this person's chart, the impact to this person. So this evaluation of the strength actually will include your exaltation or debilitation, which is the opposite of exaltation. Exaltation means is strengthened, debilitation means is weakened. And then we talk about our constellation rulership, and then is whether it's in the Vela Trikona trinal strength, and then we talk about planetary relationships, so whether those planets are in good hands, are in friendly hands. And then we talk about the planetary state, and then the directional strength, which is also known as Digbala. So we begin this episode with talking about the exaltation and debilitation of the planets. This is one of the easy ways to be able to tell whether a certain planet together with another planet, is it exalted in that constellation, is it exalted, that means is it shining brighter, or is it just being neutral, or is it being weakened, that means dimmer, so that until the point where it cannot affect much of our life. So what we know about the sun, let me just change the color for this. Okay, what we know about the sun here is that the sun is exalted in Aries constellation, and the exaltation degree, actually we're talking about 10 degrees. Okay, so where is Aries here? Aries is over here. Okay, so on top of the rulership that I'm going to cover after this, now we are just focusing on exaltation. Okay, so if the sun happens to transit this place, the sun actually moves around, or all the planets actually move around, as we have discussed in previous episode. So when the sun actually transits this house for this person, this is the Aries constellation, this is where the sun transits. When the sun transits here, the impact of the sun is actually maximized, is magnified, so it becomes even greater. So if the sun, as we know, is quite a cruel planet, it is shining, it doesn't need anyone, it is all about itself, and then there is this self-interest, which is his only interest. So sun will actually display more independence in that period, as in association with the houses that it is in. So this is actually the 5th house, and then we are talking about children. So this guy may be facing or having this children suddenly become very independent during this period, and in fact it could be having his own idea. The children could be having their own idea, the own habits, develop its own habits, have a stronger identity during this period, in which probably the this guy with this Rashi chart will actually see that the children becomes more rebellious if it's going through teenage years. So this is a moment where he could not be able to control the children. So this could be one of the meaning of this, because the sun is at home, or feels at home in this area, so it actually becomes even brighter over here. So this is the sun being exalted. Okay, so the sun actually exalts in Aries. Okay, next up we will look at the moon. Okay, so the moon is also over here. The moon will be exalted in Taurus, constellation at 3 degrees. So in particularly when the moon transits into this Taurus constellation here at 3 degrees, that's when the moon is the brightest, is the strongest. So this is Taurus constellation as we know it. So also in just a bit more information on the moon, whether we can see, because the moon is rather on the fence, because it depends on the sun for its light, for its brightness. So a bright full moon is evident, or is, we can actually see a bright full moon whenever the moon is directly opposite the sun. So in this case, the moon is very dim because the moon is placed at 11 degrees in the seventh house, and then sun is at the 6th degree, so it's rather near to the sun. Because it's so near to the sun, the moon is almost like non-existent. It is not able to shine any light, to make any influence in this sense. So all the good things about the moon is negated here. So its effect is negated, which means at this moment when the moon is in this area, it is actually losing, or this person is actually losing his senses of his a bit out of touch with his emotions. So he is unable to manage his emotions during this period, or either that you lose control, you become very emotional, and then we need to see what kind of event actually causes this. And because of that, he becomes more self centered, and then he lost touch or emotional touch with people, is unable to feel actually empathy for people during this period. So that is a period that he needs to take note, and this is a case when the moon is too near to the sun. So this is actually extra info for on the moon, to see how the moon is actually whether it's beneficial to you, whether it's having a greater impact, is when the moon just after the new moon period, and it's growing brighter and brighter every day until it's full moon. So from this new moon to the full moon period, this is called the waxing period, and then for the moon, and this is the best time for the moon to be to reap the rewards of a beneficial moon. And after its full moon, where it peak at its brightness, its brightest area, brightest period, it is beginning its waning process. So it's waning in its light until back to a new moon the following 2 weeks. So every 2.5 days, the moon will actually move one constellation. So that is when we are actually monitoring whether the moon is being in the waxing or the moon waning process. So actually we can also see how the moon will be brightest at opposite the sun. So if in this case the moon is just beside the sun, that's why you see this bracket C here. So this bracket C here is actually referring to combustion. So this combustion actually happens when the sun's light and the sun's ray is overshadowing the planet that is close to it. So if Venus is here in combustion, means that the Venus effect is practically nil. It's too close to the sun to be able to even see the impact, or to see the planet itself in Venus. So moon is exalted in Taurus at 3 degrees. So next up we have Mars, and Mars is exalted in Capricorn 28 degrees. Mercury is exalted in Virgo at 15 degrees. And we have Jupiter, which is exalted in Cancer at 5 degrees. So how do you tell, the easy way to tell debilitation is that it is directly opposite of exaltation. So let's go back to the sun. So the sun is, as we know it, is exalted in Aries, which is this part here, number 1. So the sun is very bright here. So where is the area where the sun will be debilitated in this chart? It is in Libra. So Libra is the 7th over here. So if you are looking to be or this person is rather at this point of time when the sun transits this area, this house here, the 11th house, that is when he will actually lose sight of his goals. He's not so goal oriented. He is a bit more a bit more focused on other people than self. So that is what the sun means actually over there, because the sun's effect is a lot lesser when it's in this house here. This is the the debilitation. Okay, and this is exalted here. Okay, so that is what it means by opposite. So if we can still recall, moon is exalted in Taurus, so this is where the moon will be debilitated. Okay, and then Mars in Capricorn, and so on. Mercury in Virgo, Jupiter in Cancer. So Jupiter in Cancer, the opposite will be Capricorn. So usually the opposite will be the seventh house from where uh, the from where it's actually supposed to be exalted. Okay, so next up we will look at just a bit more information. Rahu and Ketu will have no established constellations of exaltation and debilitation, because the majority of Jyotishis actually agree that Rahu, even though some of them they agree that Rahu is exalted in Taurus and debilitated in Scorpio, and Ketu is exalted in Scorpio and debilitated in Taurus, but um, there is no, because both are, if we know the nature of Rahu and Ketu is part of the 9 planets, but they are actually the north node and the south node of the planet Earth. So it actually embodies no physical planet itself. But even though, because it is signifying the north and south node, it has some significance in our reading Vedic. And also Rahu and Ketu has a kind of relationship where Rahu is always opposite to Ketu, so both of them are always opposite. So you can actually look at the chart and see where Rahu is, and then Ketu will be directly opposite. So it's like 7th house, every 7th house is the opposite. Yeah, so this is the relationship of Ketu. Okay, so this is how you actually identify whether it's debilitated or exalted. So an exalted planet will actually carries more energy or more impact on this person. So if there is certain planets in their exalted constellation, then that is the planet that you will need to be aware, or at least let your client be aware that this will be impactful should the period of this planet comes in, where it starts to rule the chart itself. So a planet placed in exaltation degree or any other degree in that constellation of this exaltation, it will attain its strongest placement in the horoscope. And these energies, right, whether it's good or bad, good or evil, it will be greatly intensified. Okay, so whether this graha, this planet, is going to give good results is actually determined by also other indicators in the horoscope. So exalted planet actually will if a planet is benefic, it will actually give benefic results, even better results. Okay, so and vice versa. So just take note of this. Okay, next up we will talk about the constellational rulership. So this is what we are talking about. Aries having is ruled by Mars. Okay, so this is, that means Mars is a ruler of Aries. So this is the constellational rulership. So what does it mean if Mars is indeed in this sector here? That means Mars is stronger. So Mars is stronger. Mars in this planet will actually do its Martian kind of effect on the 5th house of this chart. Remember, this is the 5th house, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. Okay, so Mars will actually impact or influence this 5th house of children more than other people or more than other charts. So this is what it means. So let's begin with the sun. So the sun is ruler of Leo. So if you look at where is Leo down here, Leo is number 5. So the sun is here. So if the sun happens to be here, its impact is empowered. Okay, so that's what it means. And the moon is a ruler of Cancer. So the Cancer is number 4 here. So moon is here. So whenever the moon is in here for this person, it is being at his own home. So moon actually feels very comfortable to be themselves. They are not being influenced by other people. They are very comfortable in these places. And okay, Mars we have in Aries, and then in Mercury is ruler of Gemini. So over here, this is Mercury down here. And then we have next Jupiter, which is Sagittarius. So Libra, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio. This is Sagittarius over here. So Jupiter feels at home here. And then we have Venus in Libra. And then we have Saturn. Saturn is over here in Capricorn and Aquarius. Okay, and then Rahu will be in Aquarius. So what I'm trying to show you down here is constellational rulership. So these are the rulers of these constellations, these numbers that we have here. So like I've said earlier about Rahu and Ketu, the two nodes are they are shadow planets. In other terms, they are called Chaya Grahas. So they have positions, but they have no substance. They are not having a physical heavenly body, which is a planet. So it makes them difficult to know and understand. So they have debated for many years about whether they should have any planetary kind of rulership kind of thing. So this is that confusion that Rahu and Ketu is trying to achieve. So planets are strong and well placed when they occupy their own constellations. So all these planets will feel at home in these areas. Okay, so and the next thing that we need to look at, other than this constellation relationships or the rulerships, the next thing is the trinal strength. So trinal strength is that a planet is strong for good or bad in the constellation where it is exalted, and is weak for good or bad in the constellation where it's debilitated, as we have learned before, and is strong and almost always favorable in its own positive constellation. So this is what you need to take note, and this is slightly less strong and less favorable when it is in its own negative constellation. So a planet will become very, very strong if it's in its Mula Trikona. So this is Mula Trikona is a Sanskrit term that actually talk about loosely translated into trinal strength. So this trinal strength is the sector or the zone of this particular constellation where each planet is very, very strong and very, very favorable, even more so than it is when it's in its own constellation. So Mula Trikona constellation, like let's say for Mars, for Mars is in Aries. So Mars down here in his own constellation, and it is in its own Mula Trikona constellation as well. So Mars over in Aries is very, very, very strong. So in terms of Mula Trikona, we are talking about even more to the degree, to the detail. If we want to know about the Mula Trikona, is that Mars has to be in Aries and has to be within 0 degrees to 12 degrees. 0 to 12 degrees is the Mula Trikona constellation for Mars in Aries. Okay, another one is Mercury. As we know it, Mercury in Gemini is a very positive constellation for Mercury. Mercury is very comfortable in it, and the Mula Trikona constellation for Mercury will be in Virgo. and in Virgo where, in particularly 16 degrees to 20 degrees. So so on and so forth. Just know that there is this thing called Mula Trikona constellation, and they will be even more empowered. This is the next level of strength than just being in their own home, in their own rulership. So next up, we will be talking about the friendliness and the enmity. So enmity is like they are in they're always fighting each other. They are enemies. Okay, so they're enemies. So we are looking at the friendships between the planets and the its effect on our human attributes. Okay, so uh, let's talk about the friends first. So for the sun actually feels at home, um, feels like it's in the company of friends if they are talking about they are in the constellation of ruled by moon, ruled by Mars, and ruled by Jupiter. Okay, so and it actually feels neutral when it's in the constellation of Mercury, and the sun's enemies will be Venus and Saturn. So if it's, let's say, the sun is over here in Saturn territory or over here in Saturn territory, it will feel very uncomfortable because it is always looking behind his shoulder and being very cautious, very uneasy, because Saturn is like an enemy behind. It's like Sun is behind enemy lines, so is being very uncomfortable and unable to show himself. So he has to hide. He has to uh, get ready to fight and things like that. So its effect will be actually reduced. Okay, so next up we look at the moon. So the moon is friends with the sun and Mercury, and the moon is neutral with most of the other planets, actually all of the other planets. And the good thing is that the moon has no enemies, so the moon can be in any place. It's just being in where the sun rules. This is the sun, and where is the Mercury? So we are talking about Gemini, it's also Mercury. Virgo is also there. So in these three houses, these three constellations is where moon is very comfortable in, because it's ruled by the sun and Mercury, which are uh, her friends, is his friends. So the moon will feel stronger in these areas. So when the moon actually transits these three places, it actually feels very at ease and it's very strong. So in other planets, it's more neutral. It's just a normal effect. So the same thing applies to Mars. So I'll just go through the list quicker. Mars is friends with Sun, Moon, and Jupiter, and is neutral with Venus and Saturn. And it has only one enemy, that is Mercury. And okay, for Mercury, its friends is Sun and Venus, and in Mercury it's neutral with Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And Mercury is most not at ease with the Moon. Okay, and Jupiter's friends are Sun, Moon, and Mars. It is neutral with Saturn, and it is enemies with Mercury and Venus. And then lastly, we have Venus is friends with Mercury, Saturn, and neutral with Mars, Jupiter, and enemies with the Sun and the Moon. Of course, Saturn is friends with Mercury and Venus. Is neutral with Jupiter and has enemies in Sun, Moon, Mars constellation. So lastly, I think we have Rahu and Ketu, because by traditional Jyotish, we do not consider Rahu or Mars, and usually I will exclude this in terms of to see whether they are friends or enemies. So if we really want to look at the details of sometimes you see on Jyotish apps or softwares, they actually give you a figure of how strong all this strength is, and they always quantify this strength. An exalted planet, just to give you an inclination, is about 87.5% to 100% of strength, of their potential strength. So that means if the sun is not here, but the sun is here, sorry, the sun is here, This is in the Leo constellation. It's about 87.5% to 100% of its strength. Of course, down here he is still, yeah, this is where he is ruling. So this is about 87.5 to 100%. A planet with a trinal strength. This is a trigonal strength. And this actually relates to about 75% to 87.5% of its strength. So this gives you a rough gauge of how strong it is when you compare, let's say, the planet in trinal strength. Okay, a planet in its own positive constellation is actually 62.5% to 75%. And then a planet in its own negative constellation is about 50% and 62. A planet in the constellation of a friend is about 37.5 to 50%. So a planet in the constellation of a neutral is about 25% to 37.5%. So actually, even if it's in a neutral position, it is not very strong because we are talking about 25% here. And a planet in the constellation of an enemy is about 12.5% up to 25% only. So its effect is greatly reduced. It's at most a quarter of its initial strength when it's in the enemy's constellation. So this is something that we need to take note. And a debilitated planet, the opposite of exalted, is translates to about 0% to 12.5%. So a debilitated planet will be the last on this list in terms of strength. So this is how we should understand about so if we have like an example that I've given in the previous video, that I talked about a good planet's dasha coming in, and you actually tell this friend that he is actually undergoing a very good period where he can, let's say, make a lot of money, but actually he relates to you and say that no, he's just slightly better. Probably he is experiencing that benefic planet in a debilitated position. Okay, so next up we have planetary states. So usually we will evaluate planetary strengths based on what we have covered so far in terms of exaltation, multi-trikona, and we have our own constellation, we have our friend neutral and enemy constellation. So, and usually we only look at all this, but if you want to delve deeper, there is something called planetary states that we should be more interested in. So planetary states, we are talking about even and odd constellations. So in this system, each constellation is actually divided into 5 portions. You know, each constellation is 30 degrees, right? Right, if you still remember, 30 degrees is covering from here to here. So once this one come to here, this is probably 1 degree. Then over here, this is probably 29 degrees. And then when it reaches 30, it goes to the next one. Right? So this system, you actually divide it into 5 portions. And each one signify different strength. Okay, so as we know, if we divide into 5, that means each portion is 6 degrees. That means here is 0 to 6 degrees, here is 6 to 12, and so on and so forth. So in this division for the odd constellations, that means odd constellations are the Aries, then we have this is Gemini, then we have the Leo here. All these are the odd constellations. If you look at this 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, etc., etc. All these odd constellations, in this period, there is a different strength, different maturity. So if we are looking like at the odd, right, it's always in this order. This is the child. This one, the first segment. The first segment always represents the child, and the second segment down here represents the youth. The third one, they call it the young adult, and then we have the aged. The last slice is the date, Aries 1, 3, 5, 7. This is split into 5 parts. we look at it in this order: a child, and then after that we have youth, we have the young adult, and then we have the aged, and then we have the dead. So it's in this order. But if we are looking at the even ones, that means this one is even, this is Taurus, 1 2 3 4. Okay, so 1 2 3 4 5. So this, in this 5, is actually the opposite. So if this planet is down here, this is actually the child. It's in the opposite order, whereas in the odd, this is the child. I hope this is clear. Okay, so lastly we talk about, okay, sorry, just let me remove this. Lastly we just talk about directional strength. Directional strength is they call it Digbala, Digbala. So Digbala is about where this planet is placed in the horoscope that actually gives you more strength or take away your strength. So this one is called directional strength because it is looking at the directions. So firstly, we have to consider where all this direction is. Let me just write this down first, then it will be easier for you to see. Okay, so just take it that there's this line of, this is the horizon. So when we break this Jyotish chart in this way, this is where the sun will actually rise. Yeah, this is where the sun is rising from the east. Okay, so this is the midday. This is where the sun is the brightest, and this is where the sun is setting. Okay, and then this is the start of the night, and then this is coming to the dusk. So this is where we are looking at, this direction where it's moving. So it's very easy to see because let's say we are talking about the sun. The sun will be strongest where? When it's at the south, because it is at its highest point. So this constellation here will be where the sun is strong, and this one we're talking about the south direction. So if the sun is in this segment here, it is stronger according to Digbala. Okay, then when is the sun the weakest? The sun is the weakest if it's in over here. In fact, in all of this area down here, it is the weakest because this is where the sun will not appear. This is in the night time, and this is where the moon will be shining. So there is always a time when it's the planets will be stronger and they are always moving. So this is how it is depicted. Same goes for other planets. Like for example, Saturn is strong in here in the west. Why? Because if we know when we come to talk about planets later on, I'll give you more details. But when we talk about the sun being the king, is always show his face to his kingdom during the daytime, and when it's time for when the sun is setting, that's where his servant, his butler, is going to take over and watch over the castle. And then this is where the butler will stop working, and then this is where Saturn is having the time to shine, because the butler can actually appear after the sun has gone to rest. So this is where it's the beginning of where Saturn is at the strongest. So if we go through the list, in the east we have Mercury and Jupiter that is at the strongest in this position. Is weakest, Saturn is weakest here, because this is where the butler needs to start serving the king. It needs to start working, and then this is where Saturn is the strongest, because the king has gone to rest. That's where he is more free, he has his own time. And here is where Mercury and Jupiter is weakest. And then we have the sun and Mars will be strong here, and then the moon and Venus will be weakest here. Why? Because when the sun is in midday and shining brightly, we are unable to see the moon and see Venus in the daytime sky. And then we have vice versa as well. So the sun is weakest here, sun and Mars is weakest here, and then we have the moon and Venus strongest here because they are the brightest in this period at night. This is late in the night. So this is the directional strength principle. I hope this illustration is easy for you to understand. So this is the few methods that Jyotishis actually use to determine the strength of each individual planet. So as you can see, there is so many techniques that is being used here, and then there's so many steps that we actually use. So there is quite a lot of thought put into determining the planetary strength, and then this will actually affect how we read the chart, and upon understanding the strength we'll be able to give more accurate reading. So in this episode we have covered this one. I hope you have learned quite a bit. You feel free to revisit the video because there is a lot of knowledge. That's why I have arranged a second part of this video to talk about the strength. So hope you find this series helpful so far, and please like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon in the next episode.